My name is John Passfield, and the title of this reading will be John and Cassandra, Video 1, the first chapter. So here is my novella, John and Cassandra, Fair is Fair, a diagram on the cover. That's Apollo in the middle. You wouldn't know it maybe just by picking it up off a bookshelf, but as you read the story, Apollo, the big fellow. The two little people are Cassandra, the human girl he puts a curse on, and John, the human who finds himself in the middle of this story. So here's a summary on the back cover of the book. Author John Passfield contemplates writing a novel about the mythological figure Cassandra. Suddenly, he finds himself in the presence of her tormentor, Apollo, the god who, seemingly as a whim, has brought a catastrophic curse down on the head of an innocent human. John sees Cassandra as a mythical creature whose helpless situation epitomizes all that is wrong on the planet Earth. What a chance to confront a representative of the gods, ask him to explain such actions, and demand an immediate end to all the agony in the world. So here's John confronting Apollo and demanding an end to all human agony. So we'll see how that works out. Now, I will read from chapter 1 of this novella, but I will not read all of chapter 1. I'll read only what I would call the story of chapter 1, in which the main character and his situation are introduced. So let's go to page 3 then of chapter 1. And I'm only reading what I call the outer frame, which is the story, the character setting, and concerns. And I'm leaving the deepening imagery out, but it's there influencing John and his thoughts. So chapter 1, John 1. Sitting in my car beside the river, sipping a coffee and watching the birds, they find a current and just sit on the water and float on by, sipping my coffee and proofreading a chapter, almost ready to send my new novel away, Shakespeare and Cleopatra. I keep reading it over and over. Soon be time to pick a new topic and start the writing process over again. Now, we have various levels of thought in our mind. One level of thought in John's mind is lines from Chapman's Homer. Chapman, the Englishman who interpreted Homer during Shakespeare's time, turned Homer's ancient Greek into English. So here's a line that just runs through John's head. That invisible cave that no light comforts. So just a line in John's head. Back to John's thoughts. All the agony of the world since time began, humankind suffering from forces which can neither understand nor can it control. Happiness, well, of course, but only for brief moments, squeezed in amid precarious circumstances and disastrous events that are the rhythm of what it is to be human here on this earth. So John, think about some of his concerns. That's section 1. Let's go to section 2 of this story of chapter 1. Reading a chapter of Shakespeare and Cleopatra by the river, starting to think of other things. Certain ideas keep coming back to me. They've stuck in the depths of the mind for years and years. Maybe a novel based on the Iliad. More than once I've come back to that topic, but nothing so far. Couldn't think of a novel shape for Cassandra. Not enough there to make the complexity of a whole book. Made her a folktale in this one, a layer of imagery in the image pattern that Cleopatra makes of her own life. Now another line from chapter's Homer. Imposed infinite sorrows on the Greeks. A novel snatched out of the headlines of the nightly news circa 2022 and imaged in the mythical characters and scenes of ancient Greek tales. Now in February 2022, as I was writing this novella, Russia invaded the Ukraine. So war in Troy, thousands of years ago, war in Europe and on the planet Earth as I was writing. Part 3. So what is it about Cassandra? Why is she at the core of my thoughts? She was a pest to all who knew her, Wouldn't let them just live their lives, kept reminding them of things they did not want to know. Perhaps Apollo as a character, the arrogant, domineering male. Wouldn't he unbalance the premise of the novel? Would he insist on seeing the story as his own? Excuse me, another line from Homer. Infectious sickness sent to plague. Action and immediacy, every chapter a seismic shock, a nightmare to which John is a witness, interacting with timeless forces as embodied in two characters, a human and a god. Cassandra the human, Apollo the god. Unable, of course, is John to either influence or to control. Okay, on to the fourth of 6 segments of story. Situation. How to introduce the conversations, how to get my characters on and off the stage. Well, maybe just start in the middle of the scenes. Let the lights come up as they're talking. Maybe start each chapter in the middle, on medias res. Another line from chapter's Homer, running through John's mind. To death by troops the soldiers went. A feast of imagery for sure. Every level of the mind churning out images of agony and of pain. And somewhere in the mix, a tiny note of something positive. A note that travels through the novel like blood through a vein. And now the fifth of the 6 segments of story in chapter 1. I'd love to write a Cassandra novel, just not sure how it would go. What would be, I wonder, the sources, besides the Iliad, of course? I don't remember getting much ink in those thousands of words. Another line from Chapman's Homer. All things are done by strife. Needs to simmer for a while as I consider some of the elements of the Cassandra Apollo story. I have to brush up on my knowledge of gods and things. And the 6th segment then, the last one in this chapter. Cassandra means something to me that I feel the urge to explore. Having all these terrible things happening to her, out of touch with fellow humans and with the gods, nowhere to turn, unless inside, forced perhaps to descend right down to the molten core. Another line from Chapman's Homer. Their limbs to dogs and vultures gave. But then, why would I write this novel? I've got a lot already on my plate. Every novel topic lobbies to be my next. I can't forget that I'm 76 years old. Well, I'm 78 2 years later as I read this on video, with a dozen ideas or more, all waiting their turn on the runway. I should have started this novel writing project in kindergarten instead of dipping my pen in the inkwell at 54. So I started writing at 54. I was a teacher of literature until then, and I've been a writer of literature from 54 to 78. If you do the math, you know how many years I've been a writer. So that's the outer frame, the story, the situation and concerns of chapter 1. Here's a note that I wrote as I was reading this over. I taught literature for many years to high school students. I taught many of the best books that have come down to us as our world literary heritage. When we began a new book in the class, I had 2 rules for myself as a teacher. Number 1, don't tell the students that they will enjoy the book. And number 2, don't introduce the book. Let the book introduce itself. If you were to ask a person who has read War and Peace what it's about, one might answer that it's all about the invasion of Russia by Napoleon. However, another reader might say it's all about Natasha and her personal relationships. That is why I never told my students before reading a book what the book would be about. How would I know? And as for letting the book introduce itself, I would have us as a class look at the title and read the blurb on the back cover, which only appears on paperbacks, and then we would turn to page 1 and begin to read. Well, page 3 for my book. So how does my book, John and Cassandra, Fair is Fair, introduce itself? Well, there's a diagram on the cover. I'll hold it up again. And the blurb on the back cover, both of which I've mentioned in this video presentation. And then there's the text. I have only read the first chapter in this reading, and then only what I call the outer frame present moment, the character, setting, and plot of chapter 1. Actually, though, my book introduces itself twice. The form of the book is a book within a book, a story within a story. So, the introduction of John sitting beside the river and proofreading a page or two of what he has written will be suspended, the reader will realize, and from chapter 2 to chapter 9, there will be another story, an inner story, and then the outer story will resume and come to a close in the final chapter of the book, chapter 10. The best books of our literary heritage explore the phenomenon by which we humans think on more than one level as we move through the day and through our lives. We think on the surface of our thoughts as we live our daily lives. At a deeper level of thought, sorry, I mixed up there. Let me go back. We think on the surface of our thoughts as we live our daily lives, the lives of action in the actual world. And we think at another level of our thoughts, at a deeper level of thought, as we attempt to form an understanding, a tentative understanding of the meaning of our daily lives. Of course, the two levels of thinking take place simultaneously, but are not easy to present in the form of ink and paper using novelistic techniques. That's why I have the first story go underground, as it were, become less conscious to the main character, as the deeper thinking occupies more of his thought energy, and then resurface at the end of the book. The challenge for the reader, as for the main character, is to figure out how the two stories, the two levels of thought in the mind of the main character, illuminate each other. The answer will tell the reader what the book has been about. Whether this has been an enjoyable book, an enjoyable reading experience, will be a personal response as well. So, once again, then, this is my novella, John and Cassandra, Fair is Fair. It's found on Amazon, and there's information there if you have a look. It's found on my publisher's website, which is roxmillspress.com, where there's more information as well. And on my website, which is johnpassfield.ca, there are two free books. One is the planning notebook that I wrote as I was planning and writing this novella, and the other is the journal which I wrote, the reflective journal which I wrote as I was polishing for a month or 6 weeks the text of the novella. The topics are all about writing and literature, but more important, they're all about life and how we perceive life and how we communicate our thoughts about life to other people. That's what literature is all about, the perception of life and the communication of our thoughts to other people. So have a look. If you're interested in any of these topics, just go to johnpassfield.ca and click on the icon of those two books. And lastly, thank you for watching this video.